clarifying the clear and present enemy. Hello everyone, this is S.C. Coleman, and in this video we will be asking a question, which is, what do we actually do here? Well, in order to even ask that question, we first need to clarify three things. One is who or what is the enemy. It's important to clarify this first. With that clarification, everything else will become clear. You have to clearly define the dividing line between the enemy and allies. We're not necessarily allies, but you have to know the problem to find the solution. Number two is the clarification of surveillance. What is the true and actual purpose for surveillance? Three is the clarification of focus. What is the actual objective? What's the primary goal in reality? For the clarification of the enemy, it is very simple, in fact. The primary enemy that we are dealing with today could be considered an organized corporate occupation with motives of destruction. The employees of various corporations are carrying out an organized plan to cause damage, to weaken, sabotage, and destroy. That's warfare. The employees of the corporation are doing this. That could be anything from something as simple as a administrative aide or office worker, all the way to a technician that works on street signs, all the way to the individual who processes vehicle title paperwork or licenses, and of course, naturally, city council members, county commissions, boards of the governor, right? All of these people are employees. They're employees of an organized corporate structure designed not simply to dominate, but with the intent of destroying the land and destroying the people. They effectively mystify the lines of division in our minds through the use of false labels, false definitions, and distractions. In their mind, the lines are completely clear. They are with themselves against the rest of us. Whether they're a cop, whether they work in any random governmental building, it doesn't matter. It is in their minds us against them. They are the employees of the corporate structure who are fully knowledgeable and willfully carrying out their position and the mechanism of their position against everybody else. The false labels they use in general to obfuscate and confuse comes with essentially speaking, characterizations. So they want you to look at somebody's title and assume that that title is indicative of what they actually do. You know, public servant, for instance, the title of criminal, delinquent, and convict. And there's so many more, right? The use of the title criminal is common in that they criminalize things. They make certain behaviors and activities criminals or crimes, so that way they can label that person a criminal. This type of labeling can be thought of in context of a wanted dead or alive poster. See, it's not about whether the poster is true. All that matters in a dead or alive poster is the reward money and the explanation for why. Sometimes not even that. They simply provide an explanation for why, and somebody who murders someone is equally a criminal as somebody who drives without a license plate. The idea of the false label is intended to divest liability and attention from the purposes and mission of the organized enemy corporate occupation. False definitions are similar to that, especially the use of the word illegal. Illegal specifically and only means reduced to writing. The corporate occupation structure and all of their mechanisms repeat constantly the use of the word illegal out of its appropriate context. They constantly do this so that the usage of illegal becomes and replaces the word illegitimate. The reason they do this is because they themselves are illegitimate. So they must obfuscate the definitions of words so that they are not identified for who and what they actually are. And the last example is with distractions. Police, sheriffs, state troopers, or highway patrol, or park rangers, or any of these uniformed corporate thugs are an organized force mechanism used to steal by force people's property. That could include a house, but it could also include intellectual property or metaphorical property or other things of that nature. They declare something to be their property under whatever pretext, and they send in their corporate thugs to deal with it, to seize it. So many people today are coming to this realization, and so they fall onto their second tactic, which is to set cops, so-called law enforcement, up as some type of holy warrior. And they do this by having them go after squatters. Now, one of the reasons why this distractions work so well is because people don't like vagrants because they're afraid of needles and dirtying up the environment. Where in fact, squatters may be a problem, true. Vagrancy might be a problem, and drug use and those things might be dangerous. But they are much less dangerous than the cops allegedly sent out there to fix the problem. Because those cops are corporate employees who see themselves as separate from the regular people and special. And at whatever tiny pretext or insignificant provocation, they will not hesitate to shoot somebody over a simple misunderstanding, or to take that person's house, car, or other objects of value, including and up to gold and silver. They will not hesitate to shoot anyone when they have the pretext or the excuse. And in some cases, they don't even have that, and they just do it anyway. That has to be understood. You may run into a vagrant. You might get stabbed by that vagrant. But if one of these high-strung, ignorant, incompetent, and petty, uniformed corporate thugs, cops, sees you out and about with a gun, even if it's a toy, they will take that as sufficient pretext to kill you. And the same goes for when you don't pay property taxes. They'll show up, they'll cause a disturbance, and they'll take an excuse to kill you so that your house can be sold at auction. The next one is cops versus robbers. Cops and robbers. Sort of like cowboys and Indians. It's a game that people used to play when they were kids, back when people used to play outside in parks and stuff. They'd play cops and robbers. And so one of the main distractions they do is they have a couple robbers go and hold up a bank and hold hostages. And oh, they're such horrible bad guys and all of that stuff. And then the cops can go in and be heroes, and thus they fantastically divert the attention away from the things that so-called cops actually do. And another interesting part is that in movies and TV shows, you have these people portrayed, sheriffs, cops, police, municipal police, right? Park rangers, people like that. They're always portrayed with some sort of handsome, strapping, stand-up guy. In reality, most of them are overweight, ugly, and vindictive, hateful, and unstable people. If they're not some type of lunatic woman. The next example of this is Big Pharma and the serious problem of licensed drug use, prescription drugs, so-called, and they distract away from this by trying to focus on street dealers and individuals going out and selling weed to children, while they have all these programs in the school system for doping up kids. And just like with the cops versus robbers or cops versus squatters, what is the bigger deal here? Is it the street dealer who goes around to regular clientele most of the time, who may try to sell your kid weed or something like that, but might be laced with fentanyl? Or is it the massive corporation which price gouges toxic substances with horrible side effects, which they can give to your children that are in these systems according to their own will without you even knowing it? And they have so much money that they can literally buy countries, as in the entire region of a land mass, and they can, virtually speaking, buy people and wield extreme levels of control, and most importantly, traffic and harvest biological products from children. It is essentially the idea of taking a magnifying glass and zooming in on an ant and saying, oh my God, look how awful and terrible and scary that thing is, while you're ignoring the elephant that's going to step on your head. That is what those distractions are intended to do. So the next thing is the clarification of surveillance and the purpose of it. So first we should clarify surveillance by saying, what is surveillance? And it's almost a misnomer or a false name, because yes, there's surveillance, but there's more to it than that. And simply referring to something as surveillance, such as their surveillance state, is talking about a couple different things. First are cameras at intersections. When you're driving down the street, you have traffic cameras. Their stated purpose is to stop you from running red lights. That's their stated purpose. Also to catch speeders and stuff like that, right? And here we go with these labels. Running a red light, a speeder, etc. But there's a lot more to it than that. They corral people driving cars first through these intersections. And the main purpose behind that is control of license plates and also behavioral pattern identification. They corral people through these intersections with cameras by having prohibitive construction everywhere. We all see it, we all know what's going on, and we all know it's bogus. The purpose is to divert traffic into camera-aligned intersections. The next they do is prohibitive signs. If they can't do the construction, then they just put signs up. So you go down these back alleys and they all have these signs saying it's prohibited through traffic. Okay. Generally, when you have a sign, it has some type of practical purpose to it, such as a one-way means that there's another road that you can take to go the other way, right? Now, those could be done for the same thing, sure. But generally, those plaques have a excuse behind them, just like there's an excuse behind stoplights and stop signs. There is no reason to prohibit through traffic through back alleys unless you're doing it to corral people through these congested intersections. Now, why would they congest choke points? That's a big question, and it's very simple. License plate readers. They want to be able to read everybody's license plate and essentially make an automated checkpoint, which means you don't have to have somebody standing as a guard and like looking at driver's licenses and identification. But that's the next step, basically, is having an individual out there actually checking IDs and stuff like that at these intersections. And if you follow prohibitive signs, if you follow prohibitive construction, then you will be corralled into these areas, and the purposes to them are not what they state. We'll get into that in a minute. So one of the primary purposes that you have to look at for these surveillance system mechanisms is the criminalization of behavior through harassment. And in addition, they have license plate readers going around in unmarked cars and other things. License plate readers is what they call them, but they're really cameras and they have other purposes behind them. So another thing in the surveillance state situation that you can use to identify the purpose are weapon scanners. Now, and I think we get where we're going. The focus is obviously on weapons, among other things. So the first thing to talk about the weapons, I will talk about some experiences I had. Now here in Ohio, there are 2 gun ranges, outdoor gun ranges that I went to. I don't go to indoor gun ranges. They're a complete waste of time, and they are awful. The outdoor gun ranges have become similar to this. The first of these outdoor gun ranges is called, it's the Deer Creek State Park Shooting Range. It's something like that. So it's Deer Creek State Park out towards the west side of Columbus, out near Mount Sterling, Ohio. So first, when we went out there, nothing was posted anywhere to say that the range was closed. Now, when we got there, the range was closed simply through closing the front gates and putting up a sign saying range is closed. Right? Because it's, according to them, their property. So when we finally did find out when it was open, which required asking somebody who worked at the lodge down the road, it turned out they had were only opening it up on the weekends, the 3 days of the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We went out there, and right when we got there, out comes the range safety officer. There's a park ranger. Now, when we're getting our stuff out of the car, he pulls up right next to our car, and I ask him if he's going to park in the space next door, and he says, "No, I'm just hanging out and watching." We're like, okay. So we go down to the middle range. There's 3 ranges. The ones on the ends are have people there. The one in the middle has no one. This range safety officer is a gray-haired, overweight man who looks like he's probably in his 50s, and carries one of those puzzle boxes on his hip. He didn't bother going to any of the other 2 areas. He went directly to ours while we're trying to set up our range, right? And I've got my weapons out and all that stuff strapped up, right? Carrying a shotgun on a strap, and I've got my chest rig with a handgun in it. So first of all, he walks up to us and says he saw our hats and notices we're in the military. And I correct him and say, Marine Corps. I'm a Marine, not just military, right? He doesn't like that. See it on his face. He tells us we have to move our target all the way down to the end of the backstop. And again, I have to correct him and say, do you mean to the end of the berm, or up to the berm? Now, he says the reason for that is to prevent ricochets. However, the ground under where the target is, which we're shooting down, by the way, at an angle, is soft. So this is a range safety officer who knows nothing about ballistics and is there for no reason except to harass and in fact cause a situation, right? Now, he tells us we have to put our weapons on the table, stand back, and not touch them until the range is declared hot. And he says, looks at us and tries to say, I see you have training, but you don't know what training anyone else has. And we're alone on this range. This guy is a safety risk. And I expect that was designed on purpose. Now, apart from the other things about his threatening behavior, the way he's belligerent and stupid, because as I read in a comment, he threatened a group of people who were packing scars, which is insane, with a pistol on a pizza box or in a puzzle box. The question is, how did he know to go get there right when we got there? This is not the first time. There is a range operated allegedly by ODNR, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, near Zaleski, Ohio, down in the south, where people used to go in large numbers, large groups, and just hang out and shoot. You did not have any safety violations or any problems or anything. People knew what they were doing, they got it done, they left, right? Well, now nobody goes out there. The last time we went out there, a random guy showed up, walked up to where we were, yelled hi, like waving completely just sarcastically and up in your face. And when I turned around and I was strapped up like I was before, he got a look on his face and walked back down the stairs or whatnot, and then stood over at a distance watching us. And then realizing, obviously, that he shouldn't just be so blatant about it, he went and started shooting on another range. And then when we packed up, he packed up. You couldn't be any more obvious than this guy was. So the question is, how is it that they always seem to arrive right when someone else arrives? And why are they so... Why do they act like somebody who wants you to know they're watching you? Well, first I believe it's because they have recently installed cameras. The second thing I believe is that it's part of the overall mission and plan to target what they call high-risk behavior. High-risk behavior is not simply about the carrying of weapons, but also the capability of using it, which of course they would say is intent. They say if you train to use a weapon, then you intend to use it, right? That is not the focus, it's not behind the intent to use it, it's the capability to use it. The only reason you would want to reduce the capabilities to use force is if you want to make your job in using force easier. An example I can use is with myself again. See, I would go on ruck runs. I'd put on my chest rig, I'd put on a backpack, and I would go running with music, and I'd go around a certain area and I'd come back. Just regular exercise. Every single time I went out on a ruck run around the central city area and passed a traffic light, something would happen. The first thing was the Airbnb that I was staying in over by my dad. We specifically got a complaint about a quote-unquote dog barking all the time. This didn't trip any type of, it wasn't obvious at first, because yes, there was a dog, and yes, he barked a lot. This happened 2 days, or 1 to 2 days after I went on a ruck run with wearing a backpack. Then I went on a second ruck run wearing a backpack, past some cameras, and then suddenly the Wi-Fi needed to be changed and upgraded. This is at the same Airbnb. The third time, it was a complaint about excessive use of water, which is crazy. We use less water than most people do, and so they assumed there was a water leak, and I checked and there was no water leak, and then eventually the maintenance guy came in and there was no water leak, right? The fourth time, I avoided cameras and nothing happened. Running down side streets and alleys and whatnot, all the places that are prohibited. Now the fifth time, I specifically decided to test it by running past some traffic cameras again. This time, they needed to fix the thermostat. And that was followed with the question, why are you always in the unit that we want to get into? And of course, naturally, the answer is, because I am going on an exercise run wearing a backpack. The sixth time I did this, a Chinese man very aggressively barged into the room asking when the checkout date was. Said he was part of the maintenance crew and had mixed up dates, cleaning dates, allegedly. The seventh time, some random guy popped his head in and asked if it was an Airbnb. First of all, I don't know how they knew the codes to get in. I know how the maintenance guy would have known the codes. I don't know how the other guy did. Possibly the door was left unlocked. I don't know. Either way, running outside with a backpack is considered high-risk activity. It is not simply about weapons, it's about the capability of using them and any appearance of military operations. That's a big deal. That defines and clarifies these surveillance mechanisms are intended to be used by enemies. They are not simply focused on making sure nobody carries weapons. They're also focused on identifying and targeting apparent military activities. That's important to distinguish in this context. Now, I'm also testing this out with a bicycle now. Going out riding a bicycle, wearing a backpack, having a chest rig, etc., and seeing if this gains any type of pattern response, like going out on a ruck run did. With the pattern response of these bogus maintenance requests or complaints or people randomly showing up and poking their head in and trying to see what you're doing, it creates enough evidence to show that the correlation is with running outside with a backpack on. Simple as that. If you go running outside wearing a backpack and you get picked up on any of these cameras, you get identified as engaging in a quote-unquote high-risk behavior. I expect it's the same with bicycles. So when we clarify our focus, we are not simply clarifying the fact that they are targeting high-risk behavior, but what they consider to be high-risk behavior, which is mainly activities that look military, but also, and most importantly, possibly, I don't know, and is the reason for the Second Amendment, why the Second Amendment was written, is because they want to turn weapons into crimes. Not simply the carrying of weapon, but the existence of weapons themselves is a crime. That's what they want. So they have prohibitions on weapons everywhere. They have all these leasing companies that have signs and stuff saying you cannot carry weapons here, you can't carry weapons there, etc. So they have prohibitions on weapons. Then they set up scanners and metal detectors. Those are intended for weapons, period. Then they harass people with weapons. They do what I just explained about how they treat somebody who goes on a ruck run, except with somebody with a weapon, they say stuff like, if you're trying to go stay at a hotel and you carry a weapon into the hotel, they say you can't get a room here. You try to get a room at Airbnb and they have all these prohibitions on weapons, and so therefore you get kicked out of your Airbnb, etc., right? Unless you want to fight. So they try to criminalize the idea of a weapon, and they also want to instigate from afar a violent confrontation and conflict with the purpose of dissuading or discouraging people from carrying weapons, which is treason, mind you. What Airbnb does and what hotels do is treason. But I ran into a particular instance of this at the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium. Here they had set up a scanning system, of which there wasn't any before. And the lady who took our payment for parking did not notify us of this. There was no apparent notification. So you pay for parking, you go sit, and then you walk up to this, what looks to be the entrance to a prison yard for a zoo. It's staffed by low-wage employees, apparently. They're all wearing the uniform of the zoo. None of them are carrying weapons. And yet, they will only allow you in if you walk through the scanner that apparently looks for specifically weapons. Now, they say they're looking for marijuana and weapons, but we know the focus is on weapons, specifically. It is like walking up to a prison camp there. So that's the idea that we can get into of labeling and putting into groups. I recently passed a sign that said, this area is a drug-free and weapon-free zone. Right, that attempt to associate drugs with weapons is the idea of associating gang members with weapons and drugs, and therefore if you carry a weapon, basically, then you must be in a gang, that type of thing. So what's the primary purpose to this? First of all, when we're defining the focus on military activities, not specifically just weapons, but military activities, when I went up to these people and I explained to them that they were engaging in treason as the zoo, and that what they're doing is equally a unlawful and illegitimate search and seizure, unconstitutional and everything. Before that, I asked them, are veterans able to carry weapons? They said no. Only off-duty, meaning, of course, cops. So, subcontracted security guards with less training than anyone are fine to carry weapons. But the ultimate elite, those with the most training in weapons, the most safe people, as far as when they're going to use a weapon, they will use it correctly, without any accidents, and will get the job done. Those people aren't allowed to carry weapons. I don't think that person could have made it any clearer what the actual motive is. It is treason. It is by all definitions treason. Even non-constitutional definitions decry that to be treason. It is treason. It is the intent to engage in active operations of warfare against the people, being the nation, and the country being the land. And in just about every country today, no matter which one, treason means death. No matter what level you're doing it on to or how. It simply is. It's a practical measure. You cannot allow these elements to continue with their treason, otherwise their treason will become effective. It is a practical thing. It has to be dealt with, just like a whole front line of enemies coming into your area. You have to deal with them. You cannot just say, oh yeah, well, they're ignorant, they don't know what they're doing, so I'm just going to go ahead and let them march all over me and shoot me and kill me and destroy my family, etc. It's just because they're ignorant in some terms of what they're doing does not mean they can be left alone to do what they're doing. It's the weirdest argument I've heard people use, probably embedded discouraging plants, the people who try to sow doubt in the minds of people trying to do something. Well, the main thing here about all of this stuff is to induce hesitation and anxiety, not simply around the act of carrying weaponry, but also around the act of appearing to being engaged in a high-risk activity. If you go out and you go running around and you get spotted on cameras running around with a backpack on, even if it's empty or whatnot, eventually you will be induced into a state of anxiety because you think every time I go out there to go on a run, something weird will happen, right? Some random person will try to butt their nose into whatever I'm doing and snoop around and poke around, ransack your room, leave your trunk open, right? All that stuff that Bob Lazar talked about. And so over time, you get discouraged from going out and running with a backpack. You start trying to think of ways that you could reduce yourself down to make yourself look less militaristic. And that's exactly one of the purposes there. It's also, like I said before, to identify those individuals within our community who are military operatives engaging in activity that is targeting the individuals who are behind this surveillance state. And thus, I believe we have clarified the scope, the battleground of the problem we're dealing with today. It is extremely important to identify the problem before we can even ask that question about what to do about it. And I don't really have the answer. And I'm not even sure where to look for the centralized control component. I do believe that if we can target the centralized control component, then somehow we can neutralize, if not completely remove, their capabilities of control. Thank you.